Hey everyone, how's it going? Today I want to talk about some tanks. Not any good or normal tanks, mind you, but weird ones. The tanks that, when looked at today, even in the context of when they were made, just look plain weird or wrong. A few months ago, I did a similar video about American tank designs and mentioned that other global powers could be individual videos in their own right, and that's what this video is. We'll be looking at British designs, and specifically Britain because of one design in particular that I found, and I'll mention that one when we get to it. Like the previous video, this will be a top 5 list because those are fun. So let's get right into it with our number 5 weirdest British tank design. So, how many of you are familiar with the story The Land Ironclads by H.G. Wells? It's a story from 1903 that famously featured these massive turtle-shell-esque armored vehicles and is widely viewed as being an almost prophetic story about the creation of tanks and the rise of armored warfare. It's in the spirit of the H.G. Wells Ironclad design that we have our number 5 entry, designed in 1911 by a man named John Corry, simply called Corry's Land Ironclad. While I cannot confirm that Corry was influenced by Wells and the design seen in the story, his design was remarkably similar to the Wells Ironclad with some improvements that both made it more viable and more ridiculous. On the more viable side, we have the addition of a continuous track propelling the tank, something that, while very common for tank design as we now know it, was actually pretty inventive and forward-thinking back in 1911. After all, while continuous tracks had been used on tractors and the like, it wouldn't be until 1915 that the first tank prototype would be made, and that too had a continuous track. In this sense, Corry's design was actually kind of forward-thinking, and dare I say prophetic. However, the rest of Corry's design here is completely outlandish and very ridiculous. While there is no listed size for his design, we can infer that it would have been absolutely massive by what details he does give. The tank would be armed with at least 4 120mm guns, and if we assume that he's referring to the British QF 4.7-inch naval gun, that's at least 18,000 pounds in weight right there, and each gun had a 189-inch or nearly 16-foot long barrel. There would also be at least 8 Maxim machine guns scattered about the tank, and a total of about 30 men controlling it. The estimated weight of this tank was around 50 tons, and rather enthusiastically, he predicted that the top speed, powered by two 100 to 200 horsepower petrol engines, would be upwards of 20 miles an hour, something that, given its size, would not have happened. Inevitably, Corry's design went nowhere. While he would send letters to none other than Winston Churchill promoting his design, his letters seemed to be ignored. Still, Corry did try to get compensation for his design work later on in 1932 by claiming that he was the first person to submit a tank design to the British government. His claim and case was dismissed, and Corry received nothing. For our number 4 design, we have something kind of similar to the 2 tanks that were tied for 5th place in the American tank video. If you don't recall what those tanks were, they were absolutely massive, impractical, city-destroying behemoths. It would appear as though American designers weren't the only ones making these comically large designs, and Percy Atherton designed and patented Atherton's Mobile Fortress in 1916. With a design that makes it look much smaller than it actually was. Each of those wheels there was to be 300 feet in diameter, and the entire tank was to be a staggering 150 meters tall. Imagine a tank the height of the Great Pyramid of Giza. It would also be comparatively and comically narrow at just 15 meters wide. It would be armed with 4 massive turrets on top using unspecified large caliber cannons. along with an unspecified number of machine guns, anti-aircraft guns, and potentially even poison gas dispensers. While the number of crew members was not specified either, it would certainly have to be on par with a battleship or large sailing vessel given the tank's size, and because of that size, it was estimated that it would weigh over 10,000 tons. So why did Atherton design this tank? Apparently, it was made with the intent that it would be able to cross the English Channel just by driving through it. In concept, it would use those massive wheels to connect to the bottom of the channel, while keeping the body safe and above water. According to Atherton, it could cross basically any part of the channel, but in reality this was false. In all likelihood, it could probably only cross across the Strait of Dover, and realistically, it probably wouldn't have been able to do even that. Between it sinking into the ground, tipping over, or just not being powerful enough with its unspecified horsepower steam engine, it's hard to imagine this thing making it through the water. As should be rather obvious, his tank was never made. Now, for number 3, we have a design that, at first glance, looks kind of normal. A bit flat maybe, but still pretty normal. This is what it looks like in its compact form. Fully extended, we have the Praying Mantis. Designed and patented in 1937 by Ernest James Tapp, the purpose of this tank should be rather obvious. It was made to have a tall shooting platform that could shoot over various walls, hills, or other obstacles it came across. Tapp would privately finance his creation and originally made his prototype with a fully custom chassis. As you can see from this photo of the original prototype was mainly used to test out the crew compartment located inside that elevating arm. Inside that compartment would actually be 2 people lying face down, and presumably quite close to one another. I hope they were friends. Later, in 1943, Tapp would create a second prototype using a British universal carrier for the chassis. This second model, Praying Mantis, would be armed with just 2 Bren machine guns located on top of the head of the crew compartment in what was referred to as the tank's helmet. Presumably, as the helmet section is separated from the crew compartment, the guns in it would have to be fired through some kind of remote system, which would make it rather hard to aim them. To drive this thing, the compartment would be elevated ever so slightly, and the driver would be able to see out of one of 2 small metal flaps. When they approached the obstacle they wanted to fire over, the compartment would raise up, the gunner would aim the best he could, fire what he wanted to fire, and they would retreat. Now, this may come as a shock, but testing on this design didn't go very well. While it did indeed have a raised firing platform like it wanted, it was also found to be incredibly difficult to control, difficult to aim and fire, and it didn't have much armor to protect the men inside. Additionally, the men driving it would often get motion sick. As a result, the Praying Mantis was not adopted by the British military. The first prototype was destroyed, but the second one actually still exists. It is located in the Tank Museum in Bovington and is still functional. On to number 2, we have to go back in time a bit further, back before World War I, and even back before the U.S. Civil War. In 1855, James Cowen and James Sweetlong submitted a patent for a large land battery running on wheels and driven by steam, with strong, powerful blades that could be deployed when near enemy troops. Unfortunately, they did not include any schematics or drawings with this original patent, which has led to some depicting their design as this or this. Luckily for us, though, in 1862, Cowen, in correspondence with British Prime Minister Lord Palmerston, included an image of what their design looked like in his mind. This here is Cowen's Locomotive land battery. With an overall body shape that looks rather similar to British military Brodie helmets that would come later on, the Cowen design effectively looks like an updated version of Da Vinci's fighting vehicle from centuries before. With a hardened steel shell, Cowen envisioned 12 soldiers with 12 cannons placed all around the body, and according to him, this would allow the vehicle to fire one 60-ounce round per minute at a staggering range of 2 miles. Cowen also had curved blades towards the base that line up with the wheel axles and would rotate as the wheels rotated. As there would be 4 main wheels, there would be 4 blades. A 5th wheel was located at the front of the vehicle, which would aid in turning and overall control. Powering the tank would be some kind of steam engine that, according to Cowen, would bring the top speed upwards of 20 miles an hour. Cowen also believed that his tank could be placed on a pontoon and used as a naval ram. As Cowen's design here was pretty wild, when he originally submitted it back in 1855 to the British government, it was rejected. When Cowen resubmitted his design in 1862 along with that drawing, it was again rejected. Before we get to our number 1 strange design, let's briefly go over 3 honorable mentions. Here we have Sim's land torpedo. This World War I unmanned vehicle was similar to World War II Germany's Goliath vehicles. It was to be an unmanned explosive that was driven from afar by a cable connected to it. It only makes it to the honorable mentions here as the idea was used in later conflicts, and I do struggle to call it a tank. It's more of a mobile bomb or mobile mine. Also an honorable mention is the Fowler B-5 armored road train. If you don't know what a road train is, it's something that actually still happens today, and it's where a bunch of trailers or containers are attached to a truck or tractor, thus creating, in effect, a road train. During the Boer War, in search of a way to transport goods and materiel while also protecting them, it was decided to take a tractor and its wagons and throw a bunch of armor on it. The problem with these was that the armor slowed them down to between just 2 and 6 miles an hour, and the greatly increased weight as a result made it difficult for them to travel up even slight inclines. And finally, for our final honorable mention, we have the Killen Strait armored tractor. A similar situation to the Fowler armored road train, but I felt the need to mention it because of this picture. I mean, look at how much fun they're having. But now, finally, on to number 1, where we have the reason that I wanted to make this list. I want you to picture in your mind dragon's teeth from World War II. If you don't know what these were basically concrete pyramids that were made to slow down or stop enemy tanks. These teeth were generally just a few feet tall. Now imagine one of these teeth 50 feet tall, mobile, with weaponry, weighing up to 1,800 tons. Made by Polish man Kahn in British-controlled Mandatory Palestine, these are Kahn's obstacle balls, or rolling fortress tanks. These massive spheres came in 2 sizes, 20 feet in diameter or 50 feet in diameter. They would have walls 20 or 50 inches thick, respectively, and would be hollow on the inside. An inner compartment would spin independently of the concrete balls themselves, meaning that whatever people or material inside would be able to stay level with the ground. Each ball would have 2 massive concrete doors on either side to access the inside, of which would certainly be too heavy to move by human hands. Kahn envisioned these concrete balls being made rather quickly, as they would be cast, pressurized, and injected with carbon dioxide to help accelerate the curing process. How exactly they would be cast with hollow centers is not mentioned by Kahn. For their main use, they would be used as obstacles similar to the dragon's teeth, chained together to create an impassable wall. The balls would be towed into place by whatever vehicle could manage it, and then each ball could be connected to each other through a bolt in the central axis. This would create a massive wall of 20 to 50 foot tall concrete balls. Kahn believed that these could be deployed rather quickly to the front to cut off enemy movement and create defensive positions on the fly, but it is hard to imagine how these would have been quickly deployed anywhere. Kahn also designed these balls to function as motorized vehicles. Inside the ball could be placed a petrol motor that used toothed gears to apply force to the concrete walls. When the tank was to turn, the engine inside would only apply the force to one side, thus imparting an uneven force that would rotate the ball. The driver would conceptually see in front of the ball through two periscopes in the central axle. The ball would also be armed with either Maxim machine guns or flamethrowers, somehow, possibly through the central axle again, or maybe through the various holes seen scattered about the ball here. Honestly, it's kind of hard to say. Now, to give Kahn credit, these things weren't completely without merit. Kahn's ball tanks would certainly create a massive obstacle that enemy forces would have to destroy, go around, or take time to move. Plus, if they were armed with flamethrowers, that would make removing them all the more difficult. Also, with them being made out of concrete, they were made with cheap and plentiful materials, so they weren't really wasting resources making them. Still, because of their sheer size and weight, they were rejected for being impractical. Alright, and that ends our list, so we're going to go ahead and end for today. So, thank you all for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Out of all the tanks from the list, I think I like the armored tractor from the honorable mentions the most. Just look at how happy they are, I love it. Just imagine some jaunty classical music playing in the background. It's just dudes being dudes, guys being bros. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you learned something. So, see ya!